Okay, and we're live, and I just welcomed Trey into the Hangouts. Other than saying that I grew my beard out for this, I haven't said anything else. So, stop the live stream here. How you been, Trey?
I've been very well, thank you. How about you?
Yeah, good. I was wondering, because I rewatched our last Hangout just to make sure I got any questions down that you had asked me that I didn't answer back then. And you had said that you had a crown that was a black tooth or something that had exploded. I was wondering what ended up happening with that. You had a rush job. Did that go okay for the person?
I can't even remember. That's funny. I remember saying that, but I can't remember the crown. I know it was
You had a really tricky one, and you said there was a pit in the back of it, and you filled it with some porcelain or something, and you put it in the oven or whatever, in the kiln.
And exploded.
And it exploded, and you said you had to hurry up because they were going to be here in a day, or they're going to need it in a day or whatever. And you had just gotten the color just right.
Yeah, I can't even remember it. shows what a crisis it was, but I remember I was really stressing over it.
It's a crisis for someone.
Well, apparently it worked out. So I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a specific patient because it was a very difficult shade, one of the most difficult I've had. But I guess it went okay. I can't even remember now.
Now, do you just provide the crowns? You don't actually you don't put them in.
That's right.
You're a service for other dentists, like
yes,
right.
That's right. I just serve dentists, and they do all the preparatory work, and I just make the final restoration or restorations.
How do they give you? How do you get the shade? Because I know color calibration must be a thing for you.
Sure.
How do you do they actually give you the actual tooth or photos, or how are those calibrated so you know you got the right shade?
Yeah, they may send me photos, or they may have the patient come and I'll do a custom shade, and I'll take photos. Or the most standard way is there's a couple of shade guides that are standardized, and so they'll just say, 3R15 or something. It has they're noted, or an A1. There's two of them that are the main ones, and so they'll just give me a shade off of that if it's generic. Unless if it's a front tooth, oftentimes they'll send them over so we can get it really close rather than generalized. But usually in the back posterior, they're not that important, so they just send me the shade from the shade guide.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So the last time we hung out, there were a number of times where we had talked about, you were talking, where are the questions? I wrote them in here somewhere. You asked me about how does a state of unintentionality give rise to intentionality, and is everything potential was another question you had for me. And it seemed like, I think we're all, well, I haven't talked to anybody else, but I assume everybody's happy that you've moved on from Sprawl to Pfizer now, it seems. I assume you've read Edward.
Uh-oh.
Do you hear me?
I think you blocked up that you said, I assume you've read, did you say Ed?
Pfizer's book.
It's Pfizer, yeah.
Yeah, Pfizer's book. Because it seems like you're kind of wandering into those, you're starting to use terms that you'd find in Pfizer's language, Pfizer's book. I assume you've been reading that. Did you get it for Christmas or something, or?
No, I mean, I started his book on metaphysics, but I haven't hardly read any of it. I jump around from stuff to stuff, but I'm not just solely on Pfizer. I'm still a Sproul. I mean, Sproul to me was, again, the greatest unified thinker alive when he was alive. I'm convinced of that. But Pfizer's really good. But I just took a class on philosophical theology, and there's a book by Henry Renard on the philosophy of being, and I'm looking at another one on universals from DM. I can't remember his name either, but
how many times do you read the books? Do you seem to absorb quite a bit? Do you go back through them a few times?
Good grief! I don't read them once, Bert. No, I'll read certain parts of it, but I hardly ever finish a book. You know me, I jump from thing to thing. I think I've told you, I'm an auditory learner. I rather listen to lectures rather than read, because I can do it while I'm working. That's why I like working alone. So this course I just took on philosophical theology, it was by James Dolezal. It was hard though. I was trying to listen because I'm I'm going to lose the ability to listen to them. I audited the course, and so they give me till May 7th or something to have access to them. And it's just really stilted, very difficult stuff on Aristotle, basically. But it's very good though. But it's fun to listen and learn that stuff.
Cool. What and I assume that's why. Okay, so you got muted. It seems like on Unbelievable, on the forum, the Facebook forum, right?
Yes.
And
a 3-day.
Is it over now?
No, I left. I just left because I could tell. I could tell my. I told Kat. I said, "Yeah, it's time for me to move on," because I'm not. You know, you can tell when you've reached a point. It's like it's not going to work out. Eventually, I'm gonna get banned soon because I'm not going to change my way of challenging people to do hangouts. So I just figured so that she doesn't have to kick me out. I said, I'll just go ahead and leave. I don't want you to have to do that because I know it's. I can just tell. You know, this has happened to me before, so I kind of know. So.
Yeah, that forum was better, I think, a bit ago, but it's kind of become somewhat repetitive.
Oh, there's not much there, unfortunately. It's just a meme dropping site now, but it used to be a little better.
Yeah, so. I guess that's ironic with you, with the manner with which you carried yourself on the forum too. Wasn't like you were stoking these these rich exchanges or whatever. And pretty much, people would take you to 10, you'd take them to 10 almost immediately.
Well, you know, I love to be sharp in text because I like to rouse people to interaction and hopefully to thought. And I mean, you know, I like to have drama. It's like I'm another one, an atheist, and it's almost let's see, it's faith is a mental illness is where, and I kind of have been gravitating to that last couple of days. It's kind of funny because most of the people, as you well know, on both sides, the vast majority of the people that interact on Facebook really don't know anything, and when you challenge them to actually, you know, engage, they go silent. So it's kind of fun to troll these atheists. But then after a while, again, it gets kind of old because you can't really get anybody to. I'm supposed to. I think at 9 tonight, I'm supposed to. I mean, I tried so hard to get people engaged. I finally got one guy. I think at 9 o'clock tonight, I'm supposed to do a hangout with him. I got to set that up.
Well, but I would argue though that you're someone who those people consider to be a troll and to be someone who they're not going to get anything worthwhile out of. But clearly, you and I have managed to have some good conversations and kind of. So it would seem that you can. And I've done that with other trolls before, right? Like if you don't respond in trollish ways, you can have interactions with some of these individuals. They're not beyond having it. It's just that they come in and think that you're disingenuous right from the start, that you're just looking to game, right? So you kind of that's where like Ozzy had said to me one time, and I think this is I don't think he's the author of this, but you know, we all get the conversations we deserve, right?
Sure.
And there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Bert. You're one of my favorite interlocutors. In fact, I was thinking about it. I did a couple with Joe Creason, and I absolutely loved him because he actually knew what he was talking about, and it was just a delight. You have never, not once, have you ever said, I'm not going to interact with you. You've always been willing to interact, and you've honestly done so. And if somebody really wants to, really they can, then they will. And that's the thing. And that's the reason we can get along is because you're actually willing to interact. And we've always had good exchanges back and forth. Vast majority of the people, they don't want to interact. And I mean, if I'm that stupid, then why don't you just show me up to be what I am, and we can put it on video? But that's not the case. It's just a coping mechanism, I believe, for them. If somebody wants to interact, they will.
But people are reacting to your goading to some degree, right? Like you goad people pretty hard.
I do.
And yeah, and that doesn't foster or endear you to individuals. But people call me a saint for putting up with you.
Yeah, but am I that bad?
I don't think you're that bad when you kind of develop this, like you and I have a rapport, you have a respect for me that um you there's a sincerity between us in our interaction that we have moved beyond, like we don't have to give each other benefit of the doubt anymore, or I guess we do, we give it um in a way where we're it's never, the well's not poisoned essentially, right?
Yeah, but can you name me one hangout where it was?
Where what was the
Where
well?
I have treated somebody in
No,
such a
no,
way that's
no,
not
and
been helpful.
I think you're better actually in the hangouts than you are in text. I think your goading doesn't come out like when somebody just joins a hangout with you. Then I think you're different than how you read essentially.
Yeah,
And
but
there were times,
I'm not a troll.
and actually there were some of the times early on when we interacted. The I had already hung out with you before, so I'm like, wait, who's this guy? I just hung out with him, and now he's talking to me like this. But I thought we were good, you know. And then I had to kind of get past that. That was just kind of your persona when you're writing is very different from your persona when you're live talking to them. So
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
yeah, it's not a big deal. I don't want to get stuck up on it. And I have to do the same. You know, atheists have a horrible reputation online as well. And there's often times where I've gone into a forum and I'll start a sincere interaction with someone, and immediately they're treating me. They know I'm an atheist, and so they immediately treat me like someone who's trying to get the best of them instead of sincerely trying to flesh out what it is they think's the case, not in an attempt to get them right. And so takes me repeatedly saying, "Hey, look, I'm just asking questions here. I'm not looking to trip you up or anything. I'm not looking to straw man you." And it's a very difficult thing online to build a sincere interaction with someone because the whole internet's poisoned, right?
Sure. No, that's true.
That's
true.
Yeah. Anyway, um, so I
So
figured
wait a minute, are you still on that project and
yeah, in Toronto, yeah, it's really severe. Like the hours, I'm doing the hours to somewhat. Well, I feel a bit of a responsibility to it. So I tend to invest myself pretty heavily in these things. Usually because I'm in a form of a leadership role, and I want to make sure that everybody's kind of taken care of, that everybody has what they need. And so, and my wife's coming next week. But she's been gone for a couple months, and so I'll put in pretty severe hours to try to push things through, and I enjoy it, but it comes at a cost that I did a hangout last weekend, or not a hangout, but like an off-air talk with Ozzy and Helena Handbasket, and that was really enjoyable. And I've been kind of on Discord servers, kind of chiming in here and there, so I'm kind of getting this itch back to that I have to scratch in terms of kind of having these conversations, kind of getting some channel content going again. But this project I'm on my work project's pretty severe. It's a challenging project. It's a fun one. I wish I'd been on it probably like 6 months earlier, I would say. And only because I think the pace would have been a little better. But the content's really interesting, and it's just it's got a lot of parts going on right now. And when I'm at work, like I am tapped, like I am running around. Especially my new, I took over as the VFX supervisor on it, and normally I'm a step below that.
Mhm.
So my interactions before that are a bit more facilitating production, less about reviews and less about giving feedback and being in review sessions and things like that. And doing artists, walking by and giving artists feedback. And I find it actually, I'm much more exhausted right now with the amount of as soon as I walk in, I have like a million people I need to talk to in order to keep things moving and make sure people getting the right feedback, going in the right direction. And that actually is more exhausting than sitting on the computer, like working through issues and then occasionally getting up. It's just, I feel like my attention at every moment has to be 100% focused, and every interaction I have has to have my full attention to that individual. I'm not never in a position where I can kind of space out. So when I walk up and I have to change I have to wear different hats all the time. And so I have to walk up and I'm looking at a shot that we're animating, and I have to speak authoritatively to how the animation has to be. But then when I walk over to, we're doing this whole city destruction, and we're talking about how the assets have to be handled and what the pipelines like and some of the technical requirements, I have to wear that hat at that moment and think in those terms. And it's just, and every person is waiting to have to get feedback, but I have to really make sure that I'm not, that I'm in the moment, that in each moment I'm very focused and sharp and precise. And that's, I feel like I owe it to them, but that's just exhausting over the course of a day, where if that's your 10 hours straight, that's very intense. And then oftentimes I'll stay very, very late, like working out technical issues, doing things I couldn't get to during the day because I was just running around the whole time. So it's very, it's never a role. It wasn't a role that I really, really was ever terribly interested in because of those qualities. I enjoy it, but it's just it's just a very intense thing. I was always willing to let somebody else do those things, and interested in somebody else doing those things rather than me, and having my role be more a facilitator of the production rather than leading the charge. So.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good that you're in a position now where your kids are gone and you're able to devote to that. It's like, I really quite like actually being single because I can fiddle around a lot. I can at work. I mean, I usually work late, whether I'm busy or not, because I'm on the internet and stuff like that too. It's like life for me is kind of like a vacation. I really enjoy the free time, and of course I love having my kids and my family and everything. But anyway, it's kind of nice. I can kind of feel you a little bit there that it's you're in a position where you can do that. So it's at least nice you can do that. How much longer will this project go then?
We're supposed to be wrapping up this summer, in the next couple months here.
Are you going to stay there?
Kind of in the final push. Oh yeah, yep. I'm very much enjoying the company I'm working for. I'm enjoying the people there. I'm enjoying Toronto a lot. We're trying to figure out kind of what with the kids still in school. I think we'll have a presence in LA pretty much throughout that time, and then and I think my wife isn't interested in cold climates. I think we're playing it by ear. I think we're trying to kind of try to work it out as we go. And I think we're both interested in making sure it's a lot of kind of things to balance. And my industry is very tough because I can't just be anywhere. I can't move to any old city I want to live, and I have to be near the industry.
Sure.
So I think it's a kind of figuring out all the fits. And right now this fits. How this kind of operates on a long-term schedule, we're not sure yet. So, we're just kind of figuring those aspects out. So, but cool. I did want to say I am envious of your ability to your opportunity you have to just sit and focus. I'm assuming you just kind of work on your own in terms of working through things. Yeah. And there's, one thing I missed in my old job was having big teams and facilitating large scale productions, but I'm also envious of that notion of just sitting down, putting your headphones on or whatever, or even just in an open office and just working on things, like creatively working with crafting things. Obviously I'm a visual artist as well. So I enjoy those moments to be able to draw and paint and all those things. So.
Yeah, I'm a hands-on guy. That's why I say I'm really a blue-collar guy at heart, and my favorite people are blue-collar people. That's why I like Reformed Baptists. Reformed Baptists are very unpretentious people, like these guys that are really amazing men at what they do and their theology and stuff. I can text them on Facebook and talk to them. It's really kind of cool. But anyway, I like manual labor people, and I like to work with my hands. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I just like regular lifestyle. And I love my intelligent friends because I can learn from. But I like to hang out with my friends that work at Walmart and stuff, just to hang out with. Anyway,
are you saying your friends that work at Walmart aren't intelligent?
Well, not actually. That's funny because one of my best friends, no, he was not really educated. And he was one of my best friends. And then I have another friend who works at Walmart. Who actually is a genius. And so, yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that, but
Right.
generally somebody doesn't go to college to work at Walmart. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but and I'm not putting him down. I'm just saying everybody's different, you know. And I like people who are unpretentious and transparent with who they are. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I understood what you meant about your friends at Walmart. I was trying to get you in trouble there. Okay, so maybe we can jump into so I had put in the title of this, we were going to talk about metaphysics, but I think it generally comes down to maybe talking about this idea of, you have this idea of potentiality, and this idea of that things have within them the potential to be something else, that they have the potential to become actual otherwises, right?
yes, that there has to be potential. If you're not going to grant the category of potential being, then you have to deny change. This was the whole issue of Parmenides. And he actually has a compelling argument, which I'm not completely, I can't say that I'm not 100%. Aristotle came up with the category of potential being in order to solve the difficulty between Heraclitus and Parmenides. Heraclitus, I don't have any respect for him. I just think he was just sloppy. Parmenides was probably the first true metaphysician of his school is called the Eletic school. Zeno was his disciple. But Parmenides basically said, if something has being, okay, and being just is, and the only thing other than being is nothing. And so if you're going to say something is changing, it has to be something other than what it is, which is nothing. It's a rationally compelling argument, but it's nonsensical in the fact that it doesn't comport with our sensory experience in this world, and that's the difficulty with it. It's rationally compelling what Parmenides said, but it just doesn't comport with what we see. We know that there's change out here somewhere, and so Aristotle had a great idea of coming up with this thing called potential being, and so something can move from actuality. Or for potentiality, it can be reduced to actuality and can give an account for change. But if you don't have this category of potential being, then you cannot really have any framework for saying there's such a thing as change.
Right. So you're kind of stuck between this, wanting to say that the Colorado River exists, but that the Colorado River is changing in its composition entirely, right?
Not entirely, no. There has to be some.
What is the remainder that is consistent?
Well, we know that it's not that it's still a river, that it's not becoming an elephant at the next moment. In other words, that there's some consistency of being within that. And Aristotle had the idea of form and matter, that the form was the part that informs the change, and something's form is going to comport to whatever its substantial being is. In other words, we have the substantial form of humanity, okay, and our change, our matter, that which is changing, is informed by that guiding principle within us that is humanity, is what it is. And so our change, our matter, our material change is always going to be in correspondence with our formal substantial humanity.
There's a couple different ways to go there in terms of the. Okay, so let's say, all right, so with the Colorado River, you're saying the form would be the that it has the form of a river, and that's the consistent part. So then, right, where does the form reside? What do you mean by the form?
The form. Are you saying that the form? You're speaking as if the form is somehow something that is.
You wouldn't say the form is real, then, is what you might be saying. Or are you saying the form is real? The form of the river is real.
How could it be anything other than real?
Well, it could be an abstract. It could be an abstraction, right?
An abstraction, though, is real, is it not?
No.
Is the concept 2 plus 2 plus equals 4 an abstract concept?
It is, yeah.
Is it real?
What I mean by the form, what I mean by the reality of the form is um, it seems you're saying that there's a thing waiting in the wings, essentially, that or a, I guess it would be a, if you have, how do I put this? Um, so if you have the Colorado River is constantly changing and it has the form of a river, what what do you mean by the form of the river? I guess is what I'm looking to say. Like, you're saying there's something consistent there that it holds on to.
Yes. Are you wanting to say it's? Are you wanting to say it's some kind of like physical thing that you can touch?
I'm just trying to understand I'm trying to understand what you mean by a form, like like in terms of the ontology of the form, or looking to see what your thoughts are on that.
It's that portion. It would be like kind of like the formal principle of causality is that which gives. It's like the instructions. Remember the fourfold causality of Aristotle when you've got remember the sculptor making a sculpture.
Right.
The
So
formal principle would be that which the instructions as to what the efficient cause the sculpture wants to make it out of. It's going to be the thing that informs what the thing that is coming into being is.
okay, and where do the instructions come? I guess is where's you're saying the form are the instructions.
Well, they are abstract, but they are in the thing. This is the difference between Aristotle and Plato. Plato believes that the forms were in this ideal realm, like in heaven, if you will, in the perfection. So the reason that you are Bert is that you are a receptacle of the perfection of Bert in this ideal realm, and you're an imperfect copy of that. And the problem with that is how do you relate the ideal with the instantiation here in this world? It doesn't really solve the problem. The great problem is the one and the many. How do you explain unity and diversity? And Aristotle brought basically the ideal realm, in a sense, down into the beings themselves. So form and matter resides in us, ourselves. And what he does is it helps to unify the form and the matter, the perfection, and then the.
So I understand the matter, but in terms of, you said the form resides in us. What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. The form and the matter are both.
The Colorado River is matter. Okay, I got that.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying the Colorado River also has the form of the river resides within it, is what you said.
Right.
Essentially what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
So what is the form? What in relation to, so in terms of the Colorado River, you can point to me the matter.
Right.
What is the form?
The form is that which gives animation or instantiation.
You're telling me what the form does, but you're not telling me what the form is.
The form is a unity that gives instantiation to the matter itself.
So let's say you would say that rain has the potential to be a river, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the rain has a form.
Yes, it's
and the river has a form.
Yes.
So where does the form of the rain reside, and where does the form, where are these instructions, or what, if you're going to say something has the potential to become another form, what is the transaction that's occurring from one form to another? Or what is this, where are these instructions? What is the nature of these instructions such that the matter takes the form? Like what is the connection there?
I'm not understanding you.
Okay, so you have rain, right? And you're saying rain is guided by its form.
Yes, or H2O.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And I would just say I can look at rain, and rain has a form I identify as rain because by virtue of its shape and other properties I perceive, I have I have learned that is what we call rain from talking to other individuals, and so there's a meaning to the word, such that when I talk about this thing that I call rain, other people understand what I'm talking about because they too perceive rain in the same way, right? And so that's how I would explain how the name corresponds to the object. That there's
Okay.
a public agreement that that thing with those properties, and by those properties we mean these things we experience as human beings, that's what constitutes rain. But you're saying rain has a form that's how the name or that's how the consistency of the concept sticks. That these rivers have a form of riverness. And I'm
Right.
wondering where's this form, or how does this form interact with the river, or where are these forms, or what's the nature of these forms? Not so much I know what they do. You're saying it gives the river its form, but I don't know what you mean by it when you say it gives the river its form, or it gives it is the actualization of a form or a perfection. What are these perfections, or what are these forms? Like what are these instructions? Where do these things exist? Like I don't see that.
Ultimately? You mean ultimately? What is the nature of these? I would say that I'm giving you a description that is a realist description. In other words, that these things really do exist, and I would say that they are either ideas in the mind of God, or in their perfect form, something that is that would be like it would be an idea in the mind of God. For example, it sounded like you were describing earlier that you said you come to consensus of what something is, that you were holding to a nominalist perspective, whereby something gains its being by your naming it. Would that be a fair description?
I think I'm not a I'm definitely a nominalist, but I'm not a I would subscribe to the concept of tropes and probably bundles, and so my notions of, for instance, I wouldn't reject abstract particulars. I would say that like my I also what I would say is that the concepts are that there's the concept that there's a notion called the scientific image and the manifest image, and it's how the world is, and then how the manifest image would be the agreed upon the kind of our concepts as human beings of the scientific image. So the conceptual framework that we've developed that expresses itself through language. So I have a concept of Trey Jadlow, and other people have a concept of Trey Jadlow, and it's by virtue of our coming to know you as Trey Jadlow and refer to you as Trey Jadlow, and when I say that to someone like But, or I say that to somebody like TJ Downing or Ozzy or something, they know that to which I refer by virtue of our agreed meaning that is what we, when we say Trey Jadlow, that's what we mean. And even though somebody named you Trey Jadlow, whether or not that is your name is not an individual's decision, but it is the public reference and the expectation that is an intelligible utterance, that people know what I mean by that. That's how the name fixes essentially to the concept, or to the and that there's a referent in the world that is Trey Jadlow. And then we have some concepts that do not refer to things in the world, like a unicorn, right? But you and I share the concept of a unicorn because we've got a certain set of properties that we associate with that, right? So I would say that the Colorado River is, there's a certain sense in which I mean it. So or let's say, actually, let me go to a different example. Let's say the concept of gravity, right? So when I'm talking to a child about gravity, I'm not expecting them to understand Einsteinian, notions of relativity and non-Newtonian concepts. I'm referring, when I say to gravity, to a certain concept that I believe the child shares in their understanding that when an apple falls from the tree, it happens by way of gravity. And when I start referring to gravity, I know through inference what it is that child is taking me to mean, right? And so when I talk about the Colorado River, I'm using that language in a certain speech act to somebody else, like you, as an example. Right now, I'm referring to the Colorado River, and the Colorado River has the name fixes to the Colorado River by way of my referring to it and using it as a chip in a game that I'm playing with you. That I'm cashing that out and knowing that that's going to invoke in you a certain set of notions such that you'll understand my meaning. And so that's how I understand the Colorado River. And when I refer to it, I'm referring to things like the location and other properties.
Okay, so when you name
some of those things could change. Like, if you want to take like the ship of Theseus, right? So the ship of Theseus, I assume you're familiar with the ship of Theseus.
No.
So the ship of Theseus is there's a paradox in the ship of Theseus where it has to do with identity. So if you take the ship of Theseus, and it's this great ship that's been through many battles or whatever, I don't know the particulars of the story. I only know the paradox. And we disassemble that ship. We start taking pieces off of it. And as we disassemble it, at what point does it stop being the ship of Theseus? Right. And you could say when, one of these, you could start making kind of distinctions as to when this is no longer the ship of Theseus. It wouldn't be the removal of one piece. It would be with maybe with the removal of X amount of pieces.
Right.
But then, and so then we would say that no ship of Theseus exists anymore. Right. But what if instead of just removing it, what if I remove a piece and I replace it with a new piece? And by the end of it, I've replaced all the pieces. Is that still the ship of Theseus? And you might want to say, yeah, that's still the ship of Theseus. We have this ship. It's had its pieces replaced over time, but it's still the ship of Theseus. Now, what if I take those pieces? Okay, so that's another kind of form of the paradox. But if we then take those pieces, and as we disassemble the ship, we replace those pieces, but we also take those pieces we've pulled out, and we start assembling another ship. And we assemble it in the same way as the ship of Theseus. So now all the original parts are in their ship form. And as we disassembled the one, we reconstituted it over here on the docks. We just simply moved the pieces over there. Then which one is the real ship of Theseus? Is it the one that we gradually replace pieces on, or is it the one that? And it's basically exploring these notions of identity and how the name fixes to the object, right?
Right.
What I would say is that when I'm referring to the ship of Theseus, at the moment that I refer, it's me doing the referring, not the word. I agree with John Searle that humans refer, not words. Words don't refer. Humans refer. People refer. Okay. And so when I'm referring, I have a certain use that I'm making in that moment. I'm using that term, and I have an intended use of it. And so when I'm explaining this to you, this notion of this paradox, I'm using the term all of the time in different ways to refer to the ship of Theseus. In the beginning, I was talking about it as, do you know the ship of Theseus? And I'm talking about the paradox. But then I start talking about this concept of a ship, and then I start explaining these different ways that ship could have been the case. And so, and in no time am I, by virtue of the context and my use, I'm inferring that you are following me and that I'm not having to each time break down but that you're making all the same moves that I am, that I'm basically walking you through this and I'm inferring that by way of our shared aspects that you are that you're taking my meaning and kind of going down the path of all these changes and use that I'm making, but at no time do I have to sit there and explicate it each time. And so when I talk about the Colorado River, and the Colorado River dried up, or they moved the Colorado River by diverting it and having it go someplace else, in each of those moments that I'm using the term, I'm using it in a way that it's a public agreement as to the use. It's if we didn't speak the same language, or if there are other factors involved, that like we have different upbringings and the use, and you're a new person that I'm communicating with, and we don't have those commonalities, doesn't matter how I define it. If you don't agree to it, or you're not picking up my meaning, the meaning isn't what I is not fixing, essentially. And they're not, you could say it's not meaning what I intend it to mean, essentially.
Okay.
And so that's how I would talk about identity and talk about those notions. But you seem to think that there's a realm of forms, or there's a notion of forms.
Well, there's everything has its reality, and we are not creating the reality when we name it, but we're actually naming it. Would you agree with that? Now, I'm not referring to artifacts, something that we put together, like you said, the ship of Theseus is something that we make ourselves. I'm just talking about objects that exist that are not something that we make, something that is natural, has natural form. I'm sorry?
Like a river?
Yes, a river. When you name a river, you're naming a certain conglomeration of material that occurs. But when you are naming it, are you creating it?
No, I would say I'm not creating it.
Okay, so it exists outside of you, and you're merely comporting to what's something that you see, right?
It depends on what you mean. Am I creating it? So the river, the form, the substrate that is the river is not something I'm creating. But in terms of what I mean, what I mean by the river relates to my use of the term. And so I have a concept of a river that I'm leveraging there, and the concept is something that is not the concept is something that I am building, like but that I am not just this concept does not exist out there in the realm. It is something that it is a representation within my mind of a state of affairs as I perceive it.
Right.
So I'm not naming a concept that's floating out there. There's not a concept of chairness floating out there. When I use the term chair, I'm referring to a bundle of properties that
actually exist.
Well, those properties exist in the not in the form of my representation, but in the form that I sense. So I sense the chair, but I don't sense it as a chair. That's an important distinction, right? I don't sense redness as redness. The concept is after I sense it. So my perception of it as a chair is after I've sensed it as a set of senses that give me the notion that it's a chair.
Okay. Do those senses though have any bearing upon the concept of redness?
They have a bearing on the concept of redness in that when I sense those things, I associate this term redness with it.
But the redness exists apart from your sensing it, right?
No. When I refer to redness, I'm referring to what I'm
not talking about the word. I'm talking about the reality of redness itself.
The redness itself is the concept that I have of a certain sense.
Right.
Right. So I'm perceiving this thing, right? I'm having a sensory experience. Mm-hmm. And the experience of the sensing of those things is what I'm referring to as redness. Right. The redness is not something that has a causal impact in the world. It is
or it just caused you, didn't it?
No, it's not in the thing. No, the redness is my concept of this sense data that I have.
Yeah, but the concept is not in your mind.
Sure it is.
So all of reality is just something that you make up?
No, I just said I have sense data that's exterior to me, right?
Okay, so the
I'm
data,
perceiving
the data that comes with redness is not something that you affect in any way, right?
sorry, repeat that.
The redness that you perceive, that which you perceive as redness, which of course color is secondary. It's not a primary relationship, because we're not seeing red in the object itself. We're seeing the light reflected into it onto our eyes, and we're seeing that. But the concept that you are naming is not something that you are affecting by your naming it, other than be able to communicate and to interact with it. But in and of itself, it exists apart from your naming it.
No, the concept is my cognitive. It's the understanding of the relationships.
Of real things.
Yeah, of real things. I agree that they're
Okay.
real things. I'm not denying that there's reality.
Okay.
But I'm denying that the concept of redness is in reality out there somewhere.
Okay. Is it something when you're naming it, or are you just naming nothing and it becomes red?
No, I'm naming my experience of having this sense data.
Right.
Right. So I have something out in the world. So my comforter is entering. I have sense data related to this. I have both touch and I have eye sense data of it, and I'm experiencing softness and I'm experiencing redness. But redness and softness are concepts I have that are of the sense data the sense datums that I have that I'm experiencing. And that's an experience that you have as well. I infer that by virtue of your shared biology and other facts about you. But for instance, my dog doesn't have the concept of redness. Let's say if dogs don't see in color, I don't know if that's I seem to recall that, but it may not be true. But I think it's maybe true. Or but they don't something that doesn't perceive redness as I perceive it doesn't have the concept of redness. The concept of redness is something that I have, and when I refer to redness, that term fixes to the it's my use in it in referring that denotes what it is I'm talking about. And when I use it, so I said, Trey, point to the red thing in my room, and you point to my comforter. I knew you were going to point there because I'm inferring that you and I have a shared experience of redness.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm not simply naming these concepts that exist out there. The concepts are a structural framework of relations that I've been taught. There's some that seem to be one thing that I have, like, so I have a certain disposition to follow eye lines, let's say, and I use that all the time when I do art, right? And so that's not something I learned. That's not something that was communicated to me. That is a disposition I have by virtue of my certain it's not unlike my knee being tapped and having a certain reaction. It's something that's not a conscious choice on my part or something that I had to learn. It's something that I have as part of me. Just like recognizing human faces as different from other objects. And there are people who are autistic who don't have that, who do not have a certain association with human faces and whatnot in a way that it differentiates from, say, other objects in the room.
Okay.
So, but what I'm curious about, though, is this notion of forms. You have a very distinct notion of forms, and I'm wondering when you say that something its potential is ruled by its form, I'm wondering what it is I'm trying to dig at what it is you're referring to. You said something about ideas in the mind of God.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're describing your view of describing reality, I don't see you as necessarily disagreeing with me that objective reality exists, we experience it, and we come to a consensus on how we're going to describe it. You would agree with that, right?
Yeah, the I'd say that the difference would be that I see the concepts as a shared framework that we express through language. We mean certain things by them. We describe these relations, and they're not they're not the things we experience. I'm not experiencing the Colorado River when I see the Colorado River. I have the concept comes afterward. I don't experience redness. I have sensory data that then um, uh, I'm not to use philosophical jargon. I'm not given redness. I'm given sense data, and I conceive it as redness, or I have a certain conception of that data as redness. And the difference is that I don't think that concepts are out there in the world as forms or ideas in the mind of God, that things are sticking to some set of rules. I certainly think there seems to be regularities within the universe, but they're not like there isn't a perfection of chairs that all chairs are trying to live up to or something like that. Like that seems like that's way too extravagant for my taste in terms of an ontology. I don't see any reason to think that there's a form guiding the chair to be a chair.
Okay, so how do you explain the continuity of being then?
There's a when you say the continuity of being, are you referring to like the ship of Theseus? Like how do I explain that is, or how do I explain that I'm Bert through the existence through the constant?
Why are you still Bert less than 2 seconds ago?
Well, I would say that I am a different bundle of properties, and there are certain properties I gain and certain properties that I lose. And when people refer to Bert, they are referring to a just as when I refer to the ship of Theseus, I have a certain intention or meaning in the moment that the person referring is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a good mind exercise here, intuition pump, that I used to play on my son. My son and I probably popped them on this when he was like in 6th grade, and it really puzzled him because he had a problem with the continuity of being, as you're saying. Is let's say we have a teleportation device, and the teleportation device is like Star Trek, that it works by analyzing the current quantum state of a person. It analyzes that state, it breaks down those atoms, and then it recreates those atoms, that configuration of atoms, someplace else. And so all of a sudden, this person has been teleported to another place. It's the same configuration, just in a spatial different place. We'll say it's exactly the same otherwise, that it just happens to be in a different location in the universe. But let's say the machine malfunctions, and this is essentially an extravagant ship of Theseus dealing with humans. Let's say that the teleporter malfunctions and it recreates the person in another place, but this other person, the person who is being teleported, doesn't get broken down. And now there's two exact copies of something, but they are different spatial locations in space.
Mm-hmm.
So which one is then the real Bert? Let's say we were teleporting Bert. We would say which one is the real Bert? What I would say is that when I'm talking to you and I'm referring to, well, we got to get rid of this Bert. When I'm talking about this Bert, or we say, I have to clarify which one it is that I'm talking about. But I could tell you I'm going to name this one Bert. I'm going to name this one Bart just for the ease of reference. I'm going to call it Bart. And so all of a sudden, when I'm talking about Bart, I'm talking about this Bert. and it's by way of my use in that moment and that I explained to you what I was going to do. It's not simply that I'm naming it, because you can reject the name, right? You can reject the if you understand it differently, like if you take my word to be different, my words to mean different things. It's not simply by virtue of my naming it. It's by the shared that we're inferring the same thing of each other in terms of our understanding, and that's how the meaning. That's how it refers. That's how I refer to objects. I'm using it as I'm talking. I'm using it to evoke in you certain. I know that I have certain expectations of you, that when I say something, it's going to evoke certain responses. Every word I'm saying to you right now, every hand gesture, every facial gesture, all of that stuff, I'm doing that because I know it's going to invoke in you a certain quality. I'm talking to you with my hands right now because I'm explaining something, and you're taking me explaining something, and I see you with your hand on your face, so I infer that you're trying to follow and focus as I'm saying things, right? So this communication that's happening between us all the time, and when I'm referring to Bert's, that's what I'm referring to. So to get back to your original questions, like how am I Bert? Well, I'm still Bert by virtue of that anyone that you refer to me as Bert, if you refer to my upstairs neighbors as, hey, have you seen Bert? They're going to infer, by the fact that you didn't give my last name, that like you're not somebody they work with, and you guys know a Bert, or that and that you know that they have a Bert that lives down below them. You know what it is to which I refer, right? And so the fact that that's my identity is this bundle of properties, and the way the term fixes on me is by virtue of people's use, and that it actually that they there's an intelligible quality to that. There's a norm that they're meeting when they use it, such that if they pointed to someone else and called that person the Bert that lives downstairs, they would say, "Oh, that's not Bert." Right? Like there's a kind of a conditions of satisfaction that has to be met when you're referring, and it's whether that's intelligible to you. Like whether when I say Trey Jadlow to someone, that I have an expectation as to whether they know that name or not when I'm using it. So.
Okay, so are you a materialist?
Well, what would be? I'm not a. Well, why don't you give me your definition of what a materialist would be?
Well, you're a corporeal pluralist. In other words, all that exists is matter, and it's tangible.
Well, I would probably reject that. I would say that I'm persuaded by our good friend Ozzy to be more of a more neutral about this, what the nature of the substrate is. But I am a monist, so I do think that I can't make sense of there being more than one material or a but I would rather say substrate or a makeup. The composition of reality is of one thing, not two, I would argue, only because I can't. It seems incoherent for me to say that it's two. I don't understand how they interact if there are two different fundamental substrates. I don't know how they would even know about each other. It seems like an incoherent concept to me.
So how do you differentiate between you and me?
Between you and me? Well, we're different. We're I differentiate between you and me because I have a certain set of experiences that I take to not be yours. I'm not living in Kansas as a dental technician. I don't know much about your life. So I see you as I take you to be an entirely other person.
So we're different.
Nobody's ever called me Trey Jadlow before. So
okay, so we're not the same thing.
We're not the same thing. No.
So there are at least two things in this universe: Bert and Trey.
Well, but we may be made up of the same thing, right? So this might be a higher level.
If we're the same thing, then there's no distinction. There's no line between us.
Well, no, that's not true. So I can have two things made of the same. I can have that sandcastle and this sandcastle, and they're both made of sand, but they're both two different things, right?
Yeah, but they're made up of many different things. Each
right,
one
well, that's
of them,
right, exactly. I would say we're both made up of. What I would say is that there's one substrate and there are multiple configurations of that substrate.
Well, then that substrate is not one. It is many.
No, it's just one substrate. So if everything, let's say everything was made up of quarks, or let's say everything was made up of strings, and there's nothing that a string reduces to, which I don't believe, by the way. I'm not
Sure.
advocating I'm just simply saying that there's a base constituent bit, and everything above that are different configurations of that bit.
What do you mean above? It's all one thing.
A what? What do I mean? A what?
What do you mean above? It's all one thing. You're a corporeal pluralist. You just don't like it.
No. What I'm saying. So I don't think that. So my coffee and my water are two different things that share certain properties, right? Mm-hmm. But they're both made out of atoms. They both have electrons and they have protons. Mm-hmm. They have.
Are they composite? Are the atoms composite? Or are they simple?
The atoms are composite, from what I understand.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're saying reality is simple, and yet it is composite at the same time, in the same relationship.
Not in the same relationship. Where do you get the same relationship from?
It's the you can't say that all reality is one, and then say there's differentiation in reality at the same time.
So if I point to a running car, and then I point to its engine, its tires, its constituent bits, which one's the car and which one's the bits? Are they not the same thing?
No, they're not the same thing, because you're naming it something different than something else. There's an edge to everything that you're saying.
If I'm saying a car, it's just a higher level description of the underlying bits, is it not?
Are the bits one or more than one?
The bits are more than one. They're the pieces that make up a car.
Okay, so I can't
believe you're pushing back on this notion.
You must not be understanding what I'm saying. You're saying that everything is unity, and you're also saying everything is diversity.
I'm saying that a cake is made of atoms, but right. But the cake is not an atom.
Okay.
Would you say the cake? Hold on. Do you know what an atom is, Trey?
I do.
Yeah. Do you know what a cake is?
I do.
Would you say the cake is an atom?
No. So there must be.
No, but is the cake made up of atoms, Trey?
It is.
Okay, so you're following what I'm saying.
No, you're not following what I'm saying. Is the configuration of atoms one or many? And is the atom itself one and many? Anything that's changing is composite.
Sure, I don't have a problem with composite.
Okay, how do you compose singleness?
How do you don't compose singleness? If you had one thing,
said everything is one.
No, hold on. So if you have, what I'm saying is that there's a ground level to reality that is one substrate, and that the current manifestation that I see and that I experience is that substrate in different configurations. Okay.
You are exactly giving the philosophy of Heraclitus. He believed everything was one, too, and he gave the example of fire. Everything it's one, but it's always in diversity at all time, and it's really quite incoherent. Like I said,
where's the incoherence? You still haven't pointed out the incoherence.
Because you can't be one and many at the same time, the same relationship. You're violating the law of identity. Unity is not diversity.
I'm not saying the same relationship.
Well, indeed you are. You're saying the entire universe is one, and yet it is also diverse. It can't be both.
I'm saying the universe has a constituent bit that makes it up. It's not one bit. It's many. There's a substrate. Okay, so right now, let's say that bit was atoms. Let's say there was nothing. The atom was indivisible, Trey.
Is an atom made of neutrons and protons?
Okay, so let's say quarks. No, we can call it strings. We can call it whatever for the sake of.
Are there more than one quark?
There are more than one quark. Yeah, there are more than one string too.
Okay, so there's many.
There's many. Sure. Yep.
Okay.
But they're all this. But at that level, those are all the same thing.
Oh.
I don't understand why this is so hard for you.
Oh, it's ridiculously obvious to me. That's hilarious.
Let's say the string doesn't reduce any lower. There's nothing that is that it
What, one
reduces
string or more than one string?
more than one string.
Okay.
Neither of them. No, they don't. So the one string isn't. Are you suggesting that the one string must reduce to the other string? If
there's more than one string, you're not one, my friend. It's not that hard.
No, so we have one. Okay, hold on. So we have one string that is or let's say sunlight, Trey. Let's say a photon, right? No, let's just stick with strings. So let's say there are two strings in a universe. Forget about our universe. There are just two strings in a universe. Okay. There are two strings, and those two strings are vibrating, and neither of those strings are the other. Mm-hmm. And they don't reduce. Neither of them reduce to a lower level. Mm-hmm. They are the base floor. Okay. Okay. So are those two strings the same string?
No.
Okay. So they're two different strings.
You're pluralist.
They're two different strings, right? And they're not the same string, and they don't reduce to anything. So you have a universe with one substrate.
No. What do you mean one substrate? They're two substrates.
No, they're
not more than one.
They're both strings. They both have exactly the same properties.
And if they're exactly the same, then how do you differentiate them?
They have a spatial difference.
Okay, so they're not the same.
No, I didn't say they were the same. They're of the same. They're of the same quality, though.
Are they composite?
No, they're not composite. I said they're not composite.
Okay, you can't have two self-existent. Are they self-existing?
Sure.
Okay, you can't have two self-existing beings making up all of reality, because there would have to be some kind of differentiating quality that allowed you to say that there are.
I said there's a spatial difference.
Okay, so they're contingent upon the space, then they're not self-existent.
No, they're self-existent. The space didn't bring them about. They happen to exist in the space.
But the space acts upon them, right?
The space. There is no medium. Hold on. There is no medium that's the space. The space, when I refer to the space, I'm simply referring to their relation. One is offset from the other.
And how is it offset? You said that the space is acting upon it.
It's spatially offset.
Okay, so there's two strings in their space.
Yeah, let's even say, actually, I'll even bite the bullet and say that it's all actually the strings are the same thing.
Okay.
I said that. So actually, that might be.
They're really just saying string.
Yeah, I'm saying a string. Yep.
Okay. All right. It's not.
So I'll say one string makes up the entire. Yeah, it's not composite. It's all one. It's all one substrate, and I experience it in different configurations. That's actually probably closer to what I think.
Okay. And
so I'll say the universe itself is all one substrate, okay. And it is and I'm experiencing different parts of it in.
So there's no change in this universe.
No, there's constant change, actually.
Okay, change requires something being acted upon by something else.
No, it's just moving itself.
It doesn't change.
No, it's just moving on its own. It doesn't have it moves from state to state.
What? Oh, so there's states.
Yeah, there's different states for sure.
Kansas and Missouri and
so Trey Jadlows and Bert Pools.
Right.
Yep.
So so there's change among self-existent, but it doesn't change.
The substrate itself is self-existent.
Okay, and the substrate is not identical with the instantiation.
No, the different. You and I are different. There's different configurations within the substrate. So the substrate has a uniform material that is that then is in different configurations, and those configurations are what you and I experience as Trey Jadlow and Bert Pool.
Okay, so why is there plurality in this singularity you're talking about?
Because they're different. Because it's constantly changing.
It's not composite, Bert. I mean,
it's not composite.
Simple.
No, I didn't say it was composite, though.
Right. So there can't be change within that which is not composite. It's only one. One is one is one is one.
No. There can be change. Sure, there can be change. The substrate hasn't changed.
So the substrate is composite.
The substrate doesn't have a composition from which it can
Then
be
what
different.
is changing?
The substrate is changing configuration.
Configuration of what? It's simple.
No,
Bert, you have lost this one big time. Listen, I got to get going. I got to do some more.
you always got to get going when we get to these parts. You watch any one of our videos. This is how all of our videos end.
Bert, we can always get together again.
Yeah, sure. I'll think that one through a bit more.
Okay, yeah, do that. Why don't you do that? Because
well,
to me, it's like I don't. You feel like we're just getting started. I'm feeling like I'm getting tired of running in circles here. It just seems quite obvious to me.
No, actually, I don't have very good tools by which to know what the fundamental nature of reality is. So I don't actually.
Well, you know that you exist, and you know you have logic. My old favorite beginning point.
Sure, I know I exist, and I know I have logic, and that manages to get me to work on time and occasionally figure other things out. I don't know why I would think that I could understand the fundamental nature of reality, much less so actually wager something on it. And you actually wager a lot on it. You wager your entire life on thinking that
because my life matters.
From thinking from your armchair. Look, if you want to talk morality, we can have our next hangout on that. I'm happy to talk to you about that.
I'm always happy to talk about anything.
Yeah, well, we can go. Well, the problem is the last time I tried to talk about morality with you, we just dovetailed right back into actuality, potentiality, that all your Sproullian
tropes,
jargon. Yeah, tropes. Exactly. But I would say that you take common inferences that get you through your day and think that you can, and I'm happy to demolish them. I mean, that's essentially what I've done in many hangouts now is shown you that like you're just balled up in contradictions. So. But I'm the least qualified person to talk about metaphysics, so I don't have wandered into waters I'd rather not wander in typically, but I'll do it just for the sake of entertainment. And I'm sure half of the chat is pulling their hair out at me going, what the hell is he saying?
The whole of the chat refuses to engage me. That's why I don't respect them, and I respect you.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of text interaction that you won't respond to either.
I don't even read them.
I know you don't. I don't see how that's any different than. I don't think you can complain about them then.
Well, if I feel like somebody, I won't interact with people, generally speaking, who will not interact with me.
Why don't you just say that you prefer Hangouts to text? I mean, that's.
I do. No, I do.
Right.
I do that. Well, I hate wasting 3 days. I just did that the other day. I'll spend 3 days going over something, and they just play games and disappear, and I'm like, no.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
It gets frustrating sometimes. Anyway, so we'll do it again, and you pick topic. You want to do morality, or we can do more metaphysics or whatever you want. Because I'm not educated on metaphysics, or I've never said I'm an educated guy. I'm a total autodidact, and it's I know some weird things that other people don't know, but I don't know things that most people know, very simply. So, and I'm very happy to learn, but we can do whatever you want, and I'm always happy to engage with you because
we'll do a talk of morality. Maybe we'll do a talk. Maybe we'll get together and chat about abortion. Fire things up.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Right.
Okay, Bert. All right. Good talking to you. We'll see you.
Yep. Bye. If anybody wants to jump in, I'm just going to post the link, and then if somebody wants to jump in and shoot the shit. I wandered into bad waters there and regretted half the things I said by the end of it. Don't make me side with Trey Bert. Oh, I know. All right. The side chat has the link now, or you can message me if you can't see that. See. maybe Fox or TJ or somebody will come in, ridicule me for screwing it up for atheists. Oh, Sokka. Come on, Sokka. Yeah, this is not a when we get into mereology, I don't have much to say. I should have been more I should have held back a bit more. But I don't really care. There's TJ.
Yeah.
Hopefully more of these
I can't
fools
leave you
come in
alone. Just desperately pandering to chat for the rest.
That was gonna be the saddest ending to this.
Somebody please join.
Oh,
I didn't think you did bad when you were explaining, the linguistic aspect of things. I think I figured Trey would dismiss that entirely as soon as you started. So, it was
holy shit! It's butt. Oh my god! Thank goodness. Hi, butt.
Sup, bruh?
Yeah, I figured you were probably tearing your hair out at the end there. Butt.
The Elenchtics as the Eleatics was the best part. Trey said that.
Yeah, I thought he said something else.
It wasn't Eleatics, whatever he said.
Yeah.
What were you saying? TJ, before that? Sorry. So you.
No, I couldn't tell what he said. Like when he was talking about Zeno being something of an Eleatic. I was like, what? So I just went with whatever. I didn't know the Elenchtic was a term.
I usually just try to get him past all that stuff to find out actually what. That's why, like earlier on when we were talking about forms and was I a realist or whatever, I want to hear what he thinks those things are. Like I'd rather not just I would rather not help him out there, but rather just get him to kind of express it. He just throws out so much jargon. I want to know what he means by that. I think oftentimes he just kind of gets a pass on a lot of that stuff.
He kept trying to say you were, he said corporeal pluralist a lot. And that's Sproul's term for what everybody else just calls pluralist. But, and he meant like Anaxagoras and Empedocles. So like where you think like, there's fire, earth, water, and air, and everything's a mixture of those things, which like, nobody believes that for 2,000 years. So that's not what you were doing. And then he said you were being Heraclitus. So his whole thing is just like pick an ancient Greek and say you're doing that and then say they're dumb.
Right.
Yeah. That's his tried and true syllogisms. Like he sound like Heraclitus. Heraclitus is stupid.
I loved that. He thought he was lazy. Sloppy. Yeah.
Fucking the guy who we have like hardly any remaining fragments of. It's fucking sloppy.
I would love to resurrect those people and have them
debate
just listen into the hangout. We should have like reaction videos. Heraclitus responds to Trey.
Heraclitus reacts
to Trey's.
Heraclitus is, of course, famous for hating everyone, so that would be
right. That'd be if Trey had a bigger following, that'd be a pretty funny video series to do.
But I've said for a long time, I think Trey's just an Eleatic. I think like he thinks one thing exists. I think that's the only argument he can sustain. I think all the rest is kind of just fluff. And I think saying like Heraclitus is retarded, Parmenides is great. Well, yeah, that's what an Eleatic would say.
Right.
Also, the whole like there can be one substance but two objects. That was gonna make my nose bleed.
Yeah, that that reminded me of our there's when rewatched a couple of our hangouts, and one of them was like the first one. And I feel like this went a little bit, and I knew that this was probably going to happen, but this one went a little bit more like that, where I kind of get into a spot where at the end, Trey's just, things that I would normally not want to actually get to. I don't want to be, I have no interest in being committed to positions relating to mereology. It's not really that important to me, but then I get into saying things that I'm speaking off the cuff, beyond what I've really spent a whole lot of time thinking about, and then I watch it after. I'm like, wait, why did I say that? And it's just because just being bad.
Nobody speaks more off the cuff than Trey. So wouldn't worry about that.
It's true.
I didn't catch you saying anything silly though when you were going over that. To be honest, I mean, if you can just look past Trey's like mocking laughter the whole time, I don't think you really contradicted yourself much. I mean, I think it was just Trey's inability to understand that like something can have parts and properties and not necessarily violate the law of identity.
Right.
Which doesn't really make sense. He never explained how being a monist somehow like violates the law of identity, or how exactly having multiple entities made of the same thing somehow is existing in the same relation. Right? That's what he kept claiming you were contradicting yourself on, but
yeah, I didn't really
he never explained it.
It didn't seem to me like that this was the thing that was bizarre to me about this was he doesn't think the forms are material anyway. So I don't know why the nature of the substrate would be something that he would challenge, if whether it was one or more, other than a dualist type position. But even with a dualist, you only have two, right? Like I assume that Trey's not committed to. It's not like his argument somehow hinges on the notion that there are that that there are only particulars essentially with respect to the substrate, that everything is like whole form or something. Like I don't understand.
Yeah, it was weird because like an Aristotelian presumably would say like you can have a cube made of sand and a sphere made of sand, and the shape isn't material. That's the form. And so there's two things. But then like if you were an Eleatic, a follower of Parmenides, which I think Trey is secretly, then you would say like, no, there can't be. No, there can't be two different shapes.
Right. Yeah, it didn't seem like that was like it was. I guess I wasn't expecting the pushback to be there, as if somehow this was my way of getting around forms or something, or like that. Like it seemed like it was suggesting that somehow this. Because that doesn't really. I don't feel like that's the one in the many. Like get like the solution to it or whatever isn't that things are made of a single substrate. That doesn't have to deal with the concepts and the nature of the forms, and that we experience redness in the with it doesn't touch on particulars and universals at all. Like I don't understand if he thought I was trying to do that, but that's not really where I would. You could still have universals and have neutral monism be true, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think Fox got it right when he said Trey conflates properties and parts. I think that was a wise thing to say. I think that's right. I think that's what's going on there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good differentiation. I should have picked up on that. And he would say that well, if there are properties, then you're lorded over by the properties or something like that. Well, the thing couldn't be, the thing would be lorded over by its properties. Hey, Sokka, how's it going? Sokka must be with the family at a restaurant or something. Sokka's always got.
He's got to drum up an excuse for why he's got to leave his wife here in a second, like he always does.
Sokka, you're this close to violating the law of identity.
Yeah, sweetheart, I'll be right back. It's a work call.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trey didn't seem to have much objection to any of the language stuff, but I'm not sure how that
He
would.
didn't have an objection when you explained it, but then when you got to the conclusion, he just was like, no. This doesn't work. I agree with all your premises and your argument, but your conclusion is wrong.
Yeah, he seemed to also confuse like realism about anything. Like I think I have hands is real, and realism about universals. Like that's what you mean when you talk about realism, like without qualification. You mean like realism about universals, not just do things exist. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked him to explain what he meant by realism. I was kind of confused. It seemed like he was challenging me at a strange point there. But that's the hard part with talking to Trey, is that, and especially talking about a new topic, is that I rarely talk kind of metaphysics with him. I'm kind of up to speed on all of his Parmenidean and Heraclitean like jargon and kind of how what his Thomistic notions are. But then when you start talking about this new topic, you have to get your head wrapped around what it means for him. And I'm surprised he didn't read much of the Pfizer book, because actually watching through our last hangout, I was like, the Phaser book is that like half of the things he was talking about with the principle of proportionate causality and his imminent causes and virtual causes, like that's all Phaser talk. I don't know of other sources that Trey would be exposed to where he was getting that.
Yeah, I'd be curious, has he like read a quote of Heraclitus, like one? Or has he like read Parmenides' poem? Any of that? I get the sense no, but I'd be interested.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he got like there's probably one of those basement lectures with Sproul that he
it probably all his understanding comes out of like one paragraph of Sproul talking about him.
That's certainly when you go and watch those videos that those Sproul lecture courses or whatever, he must have watched those dozens and dozens of times. Like you just hear you hear the same arguments. And that's why I thought that it was the Phaser, because Phaser goes into the virtual cause and talking about the $20 and all that stuff. And either Trey is reading Phaser forums or he read his particular examples from his book, the five proofs. So not that it's a problem like quoting from somebody or whatever, but Trey, it's just, you can, like I said to Trey that last hangout, you can see whatever it is that he's recently watching. You start to get those bits your next hangout. It's the things that they're exciting him, I guess we all do that, right? So it's not a knock. Sokka, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was an interesting discussion. Like a lot of the times when when Trey comes on, there's a kind of like a game of kind of like this translation game where just like what is he trying to say here? Like I'm trying to pick up on like the points that he's brought up before, and we've done this with the stuff that he's done with like Sprawl before in the past, where it's like, okay, I kind of understand where he's coming from because I've done the same thing. I've listened to some of the lectures and stuff that Sprawl's put out, and it's like, okay, I understand what he's kind of repeating or the point that he's getting at. But once you guys got into the discussion of substance, like I was lost. Like how the most basic ideas, like when we start talking like metaphysical ideas of substance, like those seem to be kind of like the basic groundwork of this is like, we are talking about like dualistic and monistic like ideas of this, and his complete rejection of that was just confusing to me, like that he was approaching this like this is the first time he's ever heard the discussion.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I'll probably watch it back through, and I'll catch a couple of things that he's saying time and again that I didn't quite catch that will maybe give me more insight into some of the things I was confused about. I think it's hard when I talk to Trey to not have I've talked to him enough times now that when he's saying something new to me, I won't catch it because I'm still thinking that he's in another frame of mind, or he's it's hard for me to hear him kind of clearly. And so sometimes, like that last hangout, I went back and I re-listened. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even hear what he was saying there. Mainly because I was running it through my Trey filter, essentially. And I think that happened certainly with the substance and stuff. And that's where I got kind of confused at a point. I was like, wait, what are you trying to say? I'm clearly hearing you wrong. And that's where I was confused about, when we talked about the sandcastles and then he's talking about that being the one and the many, that like somehow that there's not a base level. I don't even see why that would be a problem for his God, having a base constituent bit. It wouldn't inform, that wouldn't somehow like impugn the notion of God granting forms to things, or that there are perfections that things are meeting up to, just by virtue of the fact that like there's a constituent, like that there's a fundamental mereology to things. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, another thing Trey says, he always says form is potential. Says that a lot, and the opposite is true. Or like in Aristotelian, like the form is the actuality thing, the matter is the potential.
What he means when he says that, what he means is that the form, the form is the contains the directions or whatever, by which one thing would become another, right? Like the rain can take the form of a river, and it's the PPC or whatever, the principle of proportional causality is governed by the ability of one thing to cause it to be the next form or whatever.
Yeah, the form being actualizes the potential. Yeah, I mean, like I get that's what he means, but that's not what he says. He says the form is potential.
Right, yeah. He says a couple of things like that. He equates like cause and effect with, I think, effect with contingency, with and causes with not with actuality. I guess it would be with potential. There's times where he conflates the terms, where he uses his shorthand, and then like the contingency he would say is necessarily an effect or something like that. But that's why I tried to explain to him last time that you could mean the dependence, and it has no bearing on cause and effect, right? Like contingency is not effect.
Yeah, that's a bad one. He thinks of cause and effect as objects, like a thing is a cause or a thing is an effect, not like it's a relation between two things.
Right, yeah. And that's where he kind of gets into a lot of confusions too. And that's the thing is that I feel like maybe that I have to imagine that stuff puts these unnecessary limitations on his God by virtue of the fact that he would say that God can't be contingent on his nature or something like that, right? Like there are things that he'll reject that that he doesn't want to say, like he'll because he associates the words with cause and effect. So like if you were to say God is contingent on his nature, Trey would reject that, because it would be that he's lorded over by his nature. His nature would be God.
Well, there's a lot of weird consequences. Consider, like, I think, what is it, the second way, I guess, where it's Aquinas is saying all these efficient causes lead back to a first cause. Well, Trey can't say that. He says God is the only cause. So all those other causes, those aren't causes.
Right.
You'd have to reject all the premises that say, like, this thing's caused by another thing. No, those are all effects.
Right. Yeah, I was expecting that he was going to bring up the more of the phaser stuff with the imminent cause, and then we were going to get into potential. Like Trey seems to think of has these really weird notions with potential, that it's like a thing. Like it's not. Last week when I was talking to Ozzy, he talked about the reification of like potential energy, or like potential is a way of referring to something. And Trey's when Trey talks about it, that's like when he's talking about with forms and whatnot. And that's why I'm pressing him kind of on like to elucidate what it is that he means the thing is because Trey's often either reifying a concept or he's failing. And when he does, he's like, he tells me what a form does, but he doesn't tell me what a form is. Like he said, well, it's just a form. It's a form something can be of the form. And I'm like, yeah, well, I understand that, but what do you mean? What is the form? And then it's an idea in the mind of God. Well, that doesn't tell me how the Colorado River has its form, or like that how do those directions interact? Does he think that God's constant? He must think of like I have to imagine he has some sustaining notion that God sustains the form of the river or something, or like how does it work?
He's going to say it's an idea in the mind of God, but then he talks about how Aristotle said that's wrong and solved the problem of the one and the many by saying that's wrong.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Because it's in the mind of God.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because when he was talking about forms, like at one point in time I was thinking like that he's like putting for the Plato version of like the forms there, and then when he started talking about substance, where he seemed to disagree with like Plato's notions of forms, but then when he got to the notion of substance, it almost seems like he was challenging Bert by putting up this like pluralist viewpoint, and then accepting that Plato's like theory of forms or whatever it is was the position he was arguing for. So when he was discussing forms earlier, and then bringing up Aristotle to resolve that, and then arguing for like this the pluralist version of substance, it seems like he's just contradicting himself from earlier in the conversation.
Yeah,
but that's where I kind of jumped in, where I started watching it.
With like Parmenides and Heraclitus, we've made fun of him before, how he just thinks you can just like have both and don't have to do anything. Except today he said like no Heraclitus, but usually he says just like have both and deal with it and don't do anything to reconcile them. I think he basically does the same thing with Plato and Aristotle, as in like he reads medieval philosophy or somebody talking about medieval philosophy, and those guys were all about like trying to have 3 parts of Plato and the 7 parts of Aristotle or whatever. And so he does the same thing. He's just like, well, just have them both. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything. You can just have them both.
Right. Just switch it up when it becomes relevant to support your idea.
Yeah, exactly. Just cafeteria Plato Aristotle, I guess.
Yeah, and he inadvertently attributes to them something that's completely contrary to the 7 things that he a la carted.
Yeah, but about potential, I think was the last time you guys talked, you had the thing where he said like, well, are you potentially dead? Which of course is like begging the question. But so you gave the answer like no, to say, I don't think there's like a thing that is my potential to be dead. But I thought a good riposte would have been since he denies possible worlds. Say like, is it possible you're dead, Trey?
Yeah, I don't. His notions seem to me to commit him to. I've said this a number of times, and simply, I don't see how his worldview doesn't doesn't just become modal collapse, like where there are no potentials. And he actually on rewatching that hangout, because I was going through and getting the questions, I was actually surprised that he bit down on a couple of things where he said, well, I could say that, where he'd be willing to say that like God is a block, essentially. But it was in the context of it that creation would have to be part of that block, right? That like the whole kit and caboodle is just one big necessary clump, which is where I think Trey's view gets him to. It's a weird thing. Don't know. It seems to me that with God talk, if you're going to go with a divine simplicity, and God has his nature by virtue of like God has the nature he has, it's necessary. He's a necessary being and couldn't be otherwise. And you want to say that this God kind of goes through this exercise of creating a creation and partaking in it and saving it, that you've that you're pretty much committed to the fact that he couldn't do that. He couldn't do otherwise. There wouldn't be a reason by which he would do otherwise. I harp on that a lot, but I think that that's really, I would just, as a Christian, I just bit down on that, but that seems to be something that Trey realizes is something that's quite, it's something that he's kind of like, he'll in the like closeted, he thinks that way, but he would agree to that. He'd be amenable to that idea, but he realizes that that's just a really unattractive proposition for people to believe in. This God that's basically on the rails as much as anything else. I don't think he would ever say God is on the rails, but essentially I see his position kind of reducing to that, which when you have a necessary being, I don't see how you have that acts. I don't see how you have any way other than, I don't think you have anything other than that kind of at your disposal. And I think it just does make that creation then, that the result of that act becomes necessary. Otherwise you wouldn't have a God of that nature.
Yeah, I would add, of course, like he thinks necessary means like Parmenides. So yeah, he thinks everything's necessary. He thinks everything is one.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad, TJ, I'm glad that you said that you didn't think I butchered the language thing too bad.
No, I like I said, I don't think you had. If you rewatch it, I don't know. Maybe you'll disagree, but I didn't think you said anything obviously stupid. Or if it was stupid, it was smarter than my threshold of, stupidity. My stupidity threshold or whatever. So I wouldn't have caught it. But
yeah, I think if I was talking to anybody else who knew something about metaphysics, they would have questioned me on tropes and bundles, and I would have been hosed for having not spent enough time in the subject to really speak at length about it.
You're just repeating memes, bro. By the way, law of identity.
Yeah. This is something safe about talking to Trey, I guess. I did on Helena's Discord, I did get into a conversation with somebody about predicates and whether predicates and properties was it the same thing, I think. I thought those would have been interesting conversations for Trey, talking about saying Helena is wise, but does not, you couldn't substitute that for the property of wiseness, basically. Like predicates aren't properties is what the person's point was. That probably would have made Trey's brain explode. There's I think they had a paradox that they were elucidating in terms of the. I am in Discord. I just did this hangout for Trey's sake. Sorry, some coffee smug asked why Bert isn't in Discord, but I am. I'm like my Discord. If you want to friend me, is low. I'll put it in the chat. I think it's a little off. Anyway, that would have been an interesting conversation to have Trey in terms of properties and predicates, especially how he talks about predication. I think it would cause his mind to spin a bit.
Why would you say that predicates and properties aren't the same though? I'm not seeing it. Or I'm not seeing.
You can't do a study. I think it has to do with the term is. So if you say Helena is wise and wise is the property of wiseness, you wouldn't want to say then Helena is the property of wiseness. Like it doesn't substitute essentially.
Oh, wow.
But I think I think you would say what has wisdom or something. Like you wouldn't, that is, in my opinion, in that particular instance, is not being used. It's being used. It's not to equate Helena with her being wise. Like you're using a little bit of shorthand there in the language. You would say that she has wisdom when you're saying that she is wise. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a bit of an imprecision or something. I don't know. It didn't seem to me like a real paradox. Like it comes across to me as, you can explain it as, you could say Helena has wisdom. That would be to have wisdom. I guess it's the problem with the term is, maybe. That we use it, we don't use it to be, when we say Helena is wise, we're not saying she is her. That's like saying God is good. You can't say that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to say God is the good in that he is equal to the good. If you use if you're using is in that sense, that's your mistake there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see the paradox. I just see, like, you just say I'm using is as a copula, not as an equal sign.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Trey with predicates is horrible. It's like logic just is predication. Okay, how do we do logic with math then? There's no predication with math. So
Yeah, he's like that with everything though. And I think a lot of people, I'll see in the chat afterward, I'm like, oh, people were wanting me to call him on that, but for the sake of just moving on, because you'd never get through a conversation with him if you stopped him on his equivocations. You just have to kind of like, okay, I know what I can be generous here and kind of take what he's trying to say.
it's equivocations and Trivial Pursuit. It's just like, well, Aristotle, like, his logic had predicates. I win.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with Helena and Ozzy last weekend about it was about metaphysics. Helena was asking about John Heil. I think it's John Heil's work, and Ozzy basically was like, which I think I agree with him, is that when we're dealing with propositions and such, there's a lot of reification going on. That it's when you get into talking about. I was listening to some lectures on Sellers and the notion that concepts are required for thinking, and that language is constitutive of concepts, and that then with the myth of the given, that and this is what I talked about with Trey a little bit about sense data, but I don't necessarily agree with these views that of some of these commentaries on Sellers, but the notion that you're not given redness, you perceive something red, and then you have a concept that you associate with it, and that these are acquired faculties in terms of forming the concepts and basically constructing these relations, or like determining these relations and building and constructing these conceptual frameworks. And Ozzy's point was that when we get into talking about language as it relates to concepts and how those map onto the world, that they're that there's a lot of reification going on with respect to propositions. So when we start then like questioning each other on these notions, it's a bit of we're kind of starting to talk about these things as if they're real. And I think that's actually where Trey gets into trouble too, is I think he reifies quite a bit to the point where he's constructed kind of these things that aren't actual, and is pressing you on them, but failing to see how it is that he's reified it. So I don't know.
Well, it's certainly the case that, like, you know, he rejects all philosophy after like 1450 or whatever. So you certainly can't make like the 1890 point of whatever of being like, well, yeah, we think that way, but that's just because our language forces us to think that way.
Yeah, this is part of the problem with Trey. Like I've said this a bunch of times, is Trey like basically saying philosophy after seemingly what post-Kant, like anything post-Kant, or I guess it would be post-Descartes maybe.
Yeah, Descartes' the last guy he references, and he does it terribly. Like he does Descartes to get into Heraclitus when like they're on opposing teams, according to Trey.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, where he goes like, I think, therefore I am, therefore I know I exist, therefore I know I'm changing. What?
Yep.
And yeah, the Kant thing is just horrible. I mean, like, I'd really, you know, I would enjoy like being like, no, like contemporary philosophy starts with like Frege, not with Kant. Like Frege broke away from Kant. He used to be a Kantian, and then like Russell and Moore broke away from Hegel. They kind of used to be Kantians. We're not like Kantians. I mean, we, you know, surely you read Kant, but it calls Kantians. Like, no, that's not 1880 anymore.
Right. Well, Trey's knowledge of like Russell or something is limited to the one thing that he's ever said about Russell you can find as an exact quote in a Sproul lecture. I actually heard it one time. I was like, wait, I've heard him tell that story before.
Yeah, the causality thing.
Right.
And it's that, and I don't even get the point. It's that Russell would say basically like the first premise of the Kalam is what like the principle of causality is, and that's bad because then you'd have to actually argue for it. You're
Right.
supposed to just say like causes exist, deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, anybody else have anything else to they want to add? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it was an interesting talk. It was good that it was a little bit different than what I'm used to with Trey. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, maybe I'll
But
talk. I'll talk.
it was.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Simon.
I was just thinking. Well, technically, it was different, but still more of the same at the same time, in the same way, in the same relation.
I wish I really wanted to talk to him about potential, because I want to know what he thinks transpires when something goes from one form to another. Like, he seems to express potential as a force that is within each object, right? For it to become something else. And he would say that it can only become the things, he's going to make the principle of proportional causality argument, where it can only take the forms of things that are commensurate with its that essentially lead to the perfection of the next form or whatever. Like that, it has to be like along a certain vector, like have it has to be directed by the form to which it's going to become. That it can't become what it can't. Like the principle of proportional causality to me seems entirely tautologous, and like this way of just going like, well, no, it can't be like it can't be anything. Like it basically like somehow tries to remove the objection that you just end up with this bloated ontology of everything, every possible conceivable thing or whatever.
Yeah, that's an instance where, like, you can see the Aristotle and the Plato tugging at each other, because he'll say, like, something like, I don't know, you burn a piece of wood and it turns to ash. Well, he has to say both, like, it had the potential for ash in it, and he has to say, like, God is the form of ash and gave it ashness.
Right. Yep. Cool. I'm gonna go. I actually gotta get some work done. I was trying to think. There was something else I was gonna say along the lines of potential. Oh, I'm gonna talk about. I'll talk about morality with them next time. Although I don't think that's gonna go. Given my conceptions on morality, it's gonna be a lot of cackling on that one. So I guess that would be. Trey says we crack him up. Trey's in the side chat. Yeah, we'll chat about morality next time, Trey, and I'll give you something to really crack you up, maybe in a couple weeks or something. Anybody have any parting thoughts for Trey?
He shaved his beard out of pure shame of Bert's beard.
My beard lorded over him in this hangout. Anything else, Sokka? You good?
No, I'm good. I'm out playing with the kids right now. So
Also, cackling violates the law of identity.
Maybe we'll do a maybe we'll just to fire it up. Maybe we'll do a debate on abortion, but that's not going to go terribly well. Although it might in ways. Trey'd be surprised at the occasions that I would agree with him on. So maybe that would be an interesting topic. But maybe we need to talk about morality first. Might be the way to go. So anyway, we'll do it again. Thanks for jumping in, but Sokka and TJ. Should chat more. Get more. Find something other than Trey to talk about. I'd like to actually maybe do one of my old style hangouts, like the group hangouts, talking about some work of philosophy or something like that. So I talked to TJ about a couple of different texts, like the philosophical investigations. we'd bite that off for an hour hangout.
Well, I'll message you on Discord if because I know we're part of the couple of the same Discords, but it might not be the ones that you frequent too often. So
yeah, I'm in Alex's and Helena's.
Surprisingly, Wittgenstein said Spengler was his main influence for the philosophical investigations. So not expected, but like esoteric right-wing philosophy of history. That's what he said, like where he got the family resemblance idea for it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I an aesthetics hangout. Blue wants a. Yeah, so I'm on. I put my Discord in the chat there, in the side chat. So, and I'll write in text every once in a while there. So, or I'll jump into a chat. So.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
See you guys later. Cheers.
Talk to you later, Bert.